Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and I am so excited to be here today to talk about how to be manly and whole at the same time. And today's guest is the perfect person because he was a Navy SEAL and also is an entrepreneur and a business owner and a spiritual practitioner. And you've basically done it all, Mark Divine. So thank you so much for being here and gracing us with your wisdom.
Yeah, Shana. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Excited. COVID and all.
COVID and all. We both have COVID. We'll just be out front about that.
End of that delightful experience.
But, you know, there's something about when I think about unbeatable mind, right? Like there is a way that we can let ourselves go down and there's a way that we can keep on trudging. And I imagine as a Navy SEAL, you had to deal with a lot of, you know, whether it was physical or mental or spiritual, what would we call them? Pitfalls or stumbling blocks or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I would imagine you got to keep going.
Of course you do. And I think that's one of the, one of the key lessons in life is that challenge is just normal. It's routine, right? And so I have the saying, bring the challenge to you. So you train yourself to overcome challenges, to deal with challenges through the way you train.
Yeah.
So you take control of your training so that you can deal with the challenges when life throws them at you, like a minor little pandemic here and there, or war, or crisis, or death,
environmental.
And then, not to say that they're small or they're insignificant things. They are. We don't minimize them, but we can gracefully navigate them because we've trained ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, right? So, like with COVID, it didn't stop me at all. I felt a little tired. I'm a physical body, just like everyone else. I didn't stop training. I slowed down a little bit. Yoga looked more like legs up the wall than hardcore.
Hardcore. Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, I think part of, I'm wondering about this because I think, rest and recovery is a part of it. But like I was editing my book between naps and throwing up last week. And it's like, right. We don't stop necessarily. And I think there probably is for me some wisdom in slowing down. And, it has me curious, like, is there any story or experience from, back in the day when you were a Navy SEAL that kind of captures unbeatable mind or captures what you're teaching men for the past, couple decades?
Oh man, it's really hard, Shannon, to pinpoint like any one story, but I would say there's two that exemplify what I teach today. First is kind of the story of how I became a Navy SEAL. Because I was in Manhattan. I had graduated from Colgate University. I was at NYU getting my MBA.
Right.
Anybody who's heard my stories heard me say this because I always, people always ask about this because it's so unique. And I was working for Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, and became a certified public accountant, right? All this, and I was heading in that direction.
Yep.
And being a Navy SEAL was not on my mind.
Really? Not even there.
A lot of money was. No, not even then. In fact, this is 1985, and there didn't know much. Like I didn't know about the SEALs, frankly.
Okay.
No TV shows, no movies, no Charlie Sheen, no nothing.
Wow.
there were a couple of Vietnam books that you could blow the dust off of if you found them in the library, you know. And so what changed for me was I was an athletic individual. I was a super athlete in college and in high school, you know, 12 varsity letters, that kind of thing. And I loved training. And there was something about the way that I trained that in my, you know, kind of my inner self, my inner guide said, this is part of my life. Right. And so when I graduated college and I had a brief opportunity to try to make it the Olympics in rowing, but I didn't have the skill level, right? I had the fitness level, but not the skill level.
Yeah.
It's a very skillful sport. And I hadn't been training long enough in that sport. And so I missed that. And so then I said, okay, well, I guess being a professional athlete is off the table and I'm going to be a corporate, you know, guy, which was what I was groomed to be because my family is corporate. My family has a family business, been around for over, you know, 100 years. And it was kind of like, do this corporate route and then maybe go take over the family business or just make a ton of money and retire. Yeah. Kind of like what our culture is taught.
I was just going to say, right. That seems like very,
through
the chute of the
right.
culture.
Here I am in Manhattan and I'm in my suit and tie every day and I'm looking around me and I'm like, I don't really like this pasty kind of plump, you know, high carb lunch martini kind of environment, right?
Yeah.
There's something about this. So I kept training. I said, I'm going to keep training probably for the rest of my life. Yeah. So I would wake up in the morning, go for a 6-mile run, and at lunchtime, instead of going out to get a burger with everyone, I would go and cram out like what we now know as a high intensity interval training workout.
Wow.
Because I had literally an hour, you know, so 10 minutes to get there, find what equipment's open, bring the weights around it, break a sweat like a madman for 20 minutes, take a shower, go back and sweat for another hour sitting at my desk.
Yeah.
And then I was going to NYU Business School at night as part of this program I was in, right? And so I had this 2-hour window between like 5 when they had to let me off for school and 7:30 when I started down in the World Trade Center, the old one. And of course, everyone's thinking, well, that's time to go home and change and eat dinner and study. And I'm thinking, that's a training block, right? That's time to train.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what can I do? And one day I'm walking home from my work and I stumbled across a martial arts studio. And I wasn't looking for it, right? I was quite, you know, just kind of in my head and suddenly heard these shouts coming from the second floor of this building. And I stop and I'm standing under the flag of this studio. And it was the world headquarters of Seido Karate. And I walk up and I met the man who would change my life. And he was the Grand Master, the founder of this school, had several 100,000 students worldwide, even back then.
Wow.
And it turns out, so I joined, and it turns out that this man, Mr. Nakamura, was also a Zen practitioner and a teacher, right?
Beautiful.
And so there was a small group of students who were studied Zen with him on Thursday nights, and I joined that Thursday night group. And so I started studying Zen meditation at 21. And I didn't really understand what I was looking for, but I knew I was looking for something. Right. That this led me to that.
We talked about the beginning, like there's the wholeness.
Right. There was something missing in all the activity that I used to experience when I was out in nature as a kid, because I grew up in upstate New York and in the Adirondacks, and I used to love just going out and hiking alone, and you know. And so when I was in New York, I had trouble finding that, but when I sat on that that wooden bench, I felt the same thing. I felt stillness and quietude, and so I stuck with it. Also, I really trusted Nakamura. Anyways, back to your questions. What does this have to do with the Navy SEALs? Well, that process completely transformed my mind, right? I learned how to still my mind. I learned how to concentrate. And when I could then find that still water that runs deep inside me, then I started to have these experiences, these insights, and these kind of the sense of knowingness that I was heading down the wrong path fast as a CPA, MBA, business guy. And that I was meant to be something else. And so I started to ask better questions. I started the journaling practice, again, well before people started talking about journaling. And that led me to discover or uncover, you know, what I now call to be my calling. I was like, I was meant to be a warrior. Yeah. Again, still didn't even know about the Navy SEALs.
Wow.
So, but as soon as I had this idea in my head that I meant to be a warrior, then they revealed themselves to me.
Right. Exactly. It's like step by step. Yeah. You listen, you hear.
I listened, and then the universe is kind of like, okay, you're into the matrix now. Now here's the next clue.
Yes.
I was walking home again, similar to like finding Zen. Yeah. Walking home, I found the SEALs by walking past a recruiter's office. Wasn't looking for a recruiter, but I saw a poster on the window. and it said, be someone special. And it had imagery of Navy SEALs doing the most amazing shit I'd ever seen. You know,
You were like, that's me.
free fall parachuting on it. And I said, that's me.
Yeah.
It didn't even say Navy SEAL. I had no idea. But I went to the recruiters the next day. I said, that poster, like, who are they?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you don't want to be one of them. I was like, yes, I do.
I do.
Yes, I do.
I'm a warrior.
So the rest is kind of history, as they say. I followed that path. I got selected to go to Officer Candidate School that year. Was one of 2 people. It wasn't that year. It took me about 2 years actually to get in.
Mm-hmm.
The year I went, I was one of 2 people to go through Officer Candidate School into SEAL training. People, if you don't know about SEAL training, most people do now, but you know, maybe I don't even know how many. Like,
very few people make it through, right?
Yeah, maybe 175 total people a year graduate from SEAL training.
Wow. And how many start?
And about 11 or 1200 start SEAL training, but that's not the number that start to train to be a Navy SEAL. That's just the number who start buds.
Yes.
There's probably 10 times that
10,000. Yeah.
Don't make it, you know, to the various wickets. But most of those are enlisted, and I was an officer. So of those 175, maybe 10%, 20% are officers. So I was, and most of them come from the Naval Academy or ROTC.
Right. It's pretty amazing that you didn't.
Yeah, they don't take many from the civilian world who have their MBAs, but they took a bet on me. So I went to SEAL training as a black belt, MBA, CPA who'd been meditating for 4 years.
So awesome.
And so when I went through BUDS, or basic underwater demonstration SEAL training, there was something qualitative, and I was a little bit older too, so I was 25. My entire boat crew, so out of 185 hardcore, you know, warriors, all eminently qualified in my class, only 19 of us graduated, and I was the honor man or number 1 graduate, and my team, my boat crew of 6 others graduated with me.
Wow.
Think about the statistical probability of that is almost like 1,000,000 to 1, or like, I don't know. I don't think it's ever happened since. So, but it was the meditation that I credit with giving me the presence and the mental control and the emotional awareness to be able to be a good leader and not make it about myself, but to, you know, to help my team through in the most aggressive and competitive program on the planet where everyone's like trying to eat each other alive.
Yeah.
And yet we came together very early and said, we're going to do this together. And that was largely one of the outcomes of meditation practices. It opens you up, opens your heart up.
Yeah.
And it's that wholeness or integration that we talked about is like, that was my first experience of it. And I said, oh,
well, right. And then to have your heart opened in addition to this level of physical training, right? It's like
a combination of that hard physical with the meditation, the yin and the yang was so powerful. And, you know, this is what men kind of miss, because they think, we were talking about this before we started, they think that meditation is for wussies or yoga is for women, and they're wrong. Right. It's actually for everybody. It just hasn't been translated well into our culture.
Yes.
And what I was able to do with my team and then through my teachings was kind of create a new context for why is meditation like not just valuable, but critical.
Yes.
And to balance out all the energy that we have, all that aggression and all the outward activity, all the doingness and busyness and activity and goal setting. And so meditation becomes the recovery.
Yeah.
It's not just another activity to check off your list. It becomes your respite. It's coming home. It's coming back into the heart. It's coming back to your spiritual center.
Yeah. And to that guidance and that wisdom that you were saying,
finding the source energy, finding the wisdom, tapping into your inner guidance system, whatever words we want to use to try to describe it. And I have no claims on the words, because words can't describe the reality of it, and nobody can really, because words are just pointers. I call them like signposts in the woods. They're not the path. The path is the path.
Yeah.
You know, the signpost or the trail marker is just there to help you know that you're on the right path. So words are like that. So meditation was the slow down, the come back to home feeling that I had. And but I also didn't understand, but what was happening is it's training your mind.
Yeah. And
so your mind, you know, begins to get more inward focused. It gets to be more clear. You just begin to use more of your brain, access areas that haven't been touched before. You're able to concentrate much more effectively, get more shit done, which is very useful.
Yeah.
But also you become more mindfully aware. And so you can see things, see greater context. You can see things that other people can't see.
Yeah.
And you also don't become so attached to the outcomes and drawn up in the dramas. And this is very useful for me in SEAL training.
I was just going to say, exactly. So useful for SEALs when you're, in the moment and needing to make these high pressure decisions right then and there with your team, not just for you.
Right. And if you react negatively, or if you react and take the wrong, path, right, you could really jeopardize yourself and everybody else. So that ability to just create space in your mind between what's happening and your response to it is just
and then I imagine not panic when you've got people's lives on the line and you're responsible for them.
Mm-hmm. True. So the second experience is sort of related. By the time I went to combat, I was in the SEALs in 1990, active duty through 98. Then I got out and started a business, a brewing company, Coronado Brewing Company down in San Diego. And I stayed in the reserves. And so then I got mobilized once to go to Africa and Asia and the Middle East. That was in 2000. And then I got mobilized to go to Iraq in 2004. Wow. So by then, 2004, by then I've been meditating since 1985. So for almost 20 years, I'd taken up yoga, I'd taken up CrossFit, and I'd begun to tamper with putting these together. And I've been a martial artist too since 1985, right? Yeah. So I started to evolve a training program that integrated fitness, martial arts, and meditation practices.
This is SEAL Fit.
Yes, that became SEAL Fit after. So, and I was at USD getting my PhD in leadership and teaching adjunct leadership there. And then I get called to war, and I go to war. And what I did while I was in war, I was like over in Iraq, is like every day I practiced this integrated practice, right? And so it became an actual practice that had lots of variety to it, but every practice, every time I worked, every time I trained, which was usually about an hour to an hour and a half every day, my peers are doing, run around the base and lift weights.
Yeah. What are you doing? Tell us what you're doing.
Yeah. And I'm doing a practice that included traditional yoga asana as a warm up, right? But, I'm integrating breathing and with the movement and great awareness. So it was a mindfulness, movement, breath practice. And then I would kind of pin that and go into a 20-minute integrated, high intensity functional fitness thing with just a kettlebell, using burpees, squats, push-ups, sit-ups, stuff like that. And a kettlebell, lots of different varieties of kettlebell movements. And then I would go to the ground after that and do some ground work, core work, looked a lot like Pilates and yoga, but also just turning within and doing mindfulness, mindful movement. Yeah. And then I would end with just my meditation practice and then a visualization practice. And so there's so much we could say about all that, which we don't have time to go into, but that became my core practice. And while everyone's, in a 6-month deployment, everyone, is by the end of it is fraying at the end of the edge of reality, and, also you can imagine what
losing their shit. Like. Yeah, I can imagine.
Their shit. I was feeling really pretty darn good.
Wow.
And I had more insights and more awareness. And this was the most intense period of practice that I had. And, because before that I was in business and, running around getting my PhD, and I was kind of still keeping my, I said I was still doing Zen, but what was really happening is I would meditate, a few times a week when I remembered out, and I was bouncing around between my martial arts studio, my yoga studio, and my CrossFit gym. And it was all over the place. It
wasn't as focused.
It wasn't focused. It was fragmented. So when I was in Iraq, I brought it all together into one integrated practice, and the results were extraordinary.
Wow.
And I got back and I started to have those same insights that I had when I was doing karate and practicing Zen every day. And one of the insights I had was I wasn't meant to be an academic. And there I was barreling down the road to be an academic and getting my PhD. And yet I wanted to develop leaders, and I wanted to teach them some of these discoveries that I had made, this warrior path. So when I got back, I left USD and I started SEAL Fit, which became that integrated kind of warrior development.
Yeah. Amazing. I have a fascination and a love of exploring the whole range, right, of human potential and our mind and soul and spirit and heart and physicality. And so I just love that.
And that's a big range because it is unlimited.
Yeah. And I love that you're bringing that all together. And okay, so SEAL Fit was back then. How did what was the shift from SEAL Fit to Unbeatable Mind, or what's the core premise of Unbeatable Mind?
It's a great question. Let me tell the quick story. So at the beginning of SEAL Fit, I'm an all-in kind of person, and it may be like you,
That
right?
seems obvious.
Yeah. So I wanted to teach everything that I had learned and learn everything I possibly could to teach that. And I wanted to create a better version of the warriors, especially the special operators. My whole mission at that time was to create a more evolved warrior, so that when we went to combat, they were more aware. They didn't take the bullet, and they were making better decisions, because especially the SEALs we
need that.
Yeah, we were kind of like ambassadors and at the pointy edge of the spear out there.
Yeah.
We needed to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. And so I created these 30-day warrior warrior monk academies. Like, imagine like a Shaolin academy for SEALs and special operators.
Yeah.
And so during that 30 days, we would train from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night. And I would finish with a 50-hour nonstop, what I call crucible experience, which was modeled after the Navy SEALs Hell Week. And out of that period came 3 different kind of modalities of training. One was the physical training model that I called SEAL Fit. Mm-hmm. One was the integrated practice that I called Kokoro Yoga, that I kind of defined or described, that I had created in Iraq. And that became like a yoga program. We had videos, and this was the daily practice. And then the third was like, how do you think? How do you do the mental, emotional, and spiritual practice to evolve yourself beyond the physical?
Yeah.
And so I put all that together in a program called Unbeatable Mind. And that started because I had a lot of people come to me and say, Mark, this is great stuff. I hear incredible things from these special operators and some of the few like super elite warrior athletes who come. But what about me? I'm just a corporate guy or a girl. And so I wanted to create a program that was more accessible for everyone. And that became Unbeatable Mind. And so we developed this philosophy and this training methodology in Unbeatable Mind. And that then spun out into a company that is my primary focus today, for developing leaders of all stripes and shapes and sizes and ages. And it's powerful because it's an integrated development. So we integrate what we call 5 mountains: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual aspects of oneself. And we integrate that into
physical, mental, emotional,
intuitional, and
intuitional and spiritual.
Right.
Wow. What's your distinction between intuitional and spiritual?
Well, spiritual is your essential nature. Mm-hmm. Intuitional is still your body sensations and signals
from that spiritual essence or nature,
from everything.
Yeah.
Transrational, intuitive, meaning come from your heart or from your gut. Mm-hmm. Direct perception, meaning coming from your ability to tap into that higher self and universal
rather than just thinking about it. Or
that's right, rather than being immersed in thoughts and just being able to perceive reality. Direct perception, and also great clarity around your why or your calling, and what you're going to do about it, creating a mission. So I consider all that to be spiritual, whereas intuitive is like the felt experience and making sense of what your body's trying to tell you, your biome, your heart, your enteric nervous system, etc. Your skin, right? That. And so we train all that. We train the first 3 mostly, right? Physical, mental, and emotional is where most of the work is done. And then the intuitive just kind of opens up to you. And then that clarity and the ability to tap into the transrational and direct perception and your spiritual center kind of emerges from all that.
As a result.
It's a faster result than just meditating, because your body gets extraordinarily healthy and aligned. Yeah. Right? Like all the chakras align, the spine aligns, all the energy's flowing, and your brain is working better, and you're accessing more of your brain, which then allows for the meditation to take hold.
Right. It's like an upward spiral. For men who have not heard of the chakras, or who are like, oh, that's another woo-woo term. I love that you're bringing this into the,
call them energy centers instead of chakras.
Yeah. And can you describe them a little bit, how you see them, or what happens when your energy centers start to open and align?
Yeah. Well, we all have them, and essentially the health of the energy centers will inform the health of both your physical body as well as your psychosocial and sexual body, right? Your emotional body. And And so they've been mapped out by every spiritual and religious tradition out there, right? You find them in Tantra, you find them in the Torah, or not the Torah, what's
the Kabbalah.
The Kabbalah, thank you. You find them in Islamic
Christian mysticism,
tradition,
right?
Christian mysticism and yoga, et cetera, et cetera. But most people aren't familiar with them, and so they just dismiss them. And also because medical science doesn't have the instrumentation to study them, they dismiss it. But it doesn't mean they're not there. They are. And when you do the energy work practice that you probably talked about a lot, then you start to experience it, and then you're like, okay, you become a study of N=1. I get this, so I don't have to, buy into the skepticism anymore.
Yeah.
So you have the energy centers start at the base of the spine, they go to the crown of the head, and they kind of are aligned along the spine, but they're not in this. They're really energy centers that are non-physical.
Right.
And then you have the central channel and the two nadis that kind of wrap around them, and everywhere those channels cross the central channel, which runs down the center of your spine, is one of these energy centers or nadi or chakras, right? And there's 7 of them. At any rate, so the base one is related to security, and so if you have an unhealthy root chakra, root energy center, then you're going to be insecure. You're going to feel like survival instincts can always be triggered. You're always going to be thinking that I don't have enough, or I'm in survival mode. And that's unhealthy, right? Your second chakra is more around your sexuality and your creative expression, right? And so if you have blocked energy there, then you're either going to have an unhealthy expression or repressed sexual energy. So we want to clear that up. A lot of guys have confusion around that, or they think sex is all about projecting power and energy, and and they overdo it and they deplete their energy. So we really want to heal that and get that whole. The third,
or you have the nice guys who just kind of suppress it, repress it, right?
Right, exactly. There's a lot of ways that shows up negatively or broken in male and female in our culture, just because we don't have it. We don't have dialogue about it.
Yeah.
Or training about it. The third is around your belly, and it's like the warrior fire of the belly. The belly fire of the warrior, I should say, comes from that third chakra, and that's your power center, your ability to project power, take action, right? And so if you feel incompetent or weak and unable to take action, that means your third chakra needs a little bit of work. The fourth chakra is the heart center, Anahata. And so if your fourth chakra is closed or blocked, then your heart's not going to be able to open, right? So working on the heart doesn't mean just getting heart healthy physically. That helps.
Right.
And it'll help your heart chakra. But if you work on the chakra, the heart will then open and get healthy, right? And then you'll be able to feel the heart.
Your emotional heart, energetic
brings
heart.
more empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
And openness and ability to connect to human beings as humans as opposed to as others.
Right.
The fifth chakra is the throat. It's behind the throat, or it's kind of in the middle of your neck, around your throat. And this is about expression, quite naturally, right? You'd think these kind of line up, right? So it's the ability to voice your, to feel you have a voice. Again, you could see how if someone feels blocked there, they won't express themselves. They'll be codependent or dependent.
Yeah.
They won't be assertive. They won't be able to set boundaries. They'll be quiet or meek, So we want to heal that to be expressive, not aggressive.
I was going to say, right, or aggressive.
Yeah, the opposite is aggressive or passive aggressive, right? So we want to be expressive and be skillful with our communications, powerful with our voice. And the sixth is in the basically the center. It's right above where the spine ends, and it's considered the third eye. What we really mean by that is your inner sight. Like when we talk about insight, you feel it in your head center. It's because it's coming from that center. And the health of the pineal gland is associated with this, and that's considered to be like the wisdom gland, that when you get this sixth center chakra and it opens up and gets really healthy, then that pineal gland also opens up and gets really healthy, and that allows you to have similar spiritual experiences as you get in like a psychedelic journey.
Yeah,
but without the psychedelics.
Yeah.
And then the seventh is the crown chakra, which is just above the crown of the head. And so without that being open, you don't really have access to cosmic consciousness or universal consciousness or Godhead or Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call it, depending upon your belief systems or traditions. It's going to be kind of blocked.
Yep.
And so that is opening that and
my head started tingling.
Yeah, I know, tingling. It does. When I talk about this or even bring my hands up here, you can feel it. It's like, and so that's the seventh chakra. Now, these naturally will get healthier when you do an integrated practice, which means you're really focused on training from the inside out. Or said another way, we start from the outside to go in, and then we work from the inside and bring it out. Where
it seems like
you
a
don't
cycle.
look at yourself as dragging your body to the gym, right? And then dragging yourself to church over there on Sundays as spirituality, and then dragging yourself to a therapist when your relation is broke as kind of emotional work. No, you look at it as like one
all
integrated
integrated.
whole. But I can to understand it better, I can look at it as body, mind, spirit, or physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, spiritual. Like there's different systems. And so now I train myself. When I train myself physically, I'm also training myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and I'm opening up the intuition centers, right?
Yeah.
So the way I like to teach men and women is like, consider every time you physically train to be a integrated training session, right? There's an intention behind it. You're working with aligning the chakras and moving the energy. So there's preparatory exercises that look more like Qigong or yoga. There's the high intensity part, which you typically would think of as exercise, but you do it with awareness, not for competition, right? Not to beat something, not to necessarily just look good in the bathing suit. That could be an outcome. Great. We hope it is. But it's really for lifelong health, for integrated functional movement, practical use of your body to be able to fit vessel for you for life. And then we also we like to train as a team and to have both a fitness coach and an emotional coach to help you really evolve, because, we get to these sticking points that we call the shadow self. And we have things that get stuck, and these get stuck in different chakras. They get stuck at a very young age. So we need help overcoming.
I appreciate that you speak about the shadow self and the shadow pieces, because oftentimes as we open, what I found is the shadows get
they get exposed
larger, right? They get exposed, and the deeper we go, the older they are, and the more wound around our psyche. And
that's right. Well said. And you're right. And guys fear this. They think it's icky because it's hard work. But it's necessary, because you can get stuck. Most guys find the physical and mental easy, right? Mental toughness. Yeah, it's like doing barbell curls in my brain. I can just focus more and get shit done. I can overcome adversity. Great.
Yeah. Then get into the emotional.
Then you get to the emotional piece, and they're like, no.
Yeah. It amazes me.
One client told me after 3 months, one client said, my therapist fired me because she said that I was done. And I was like, yeah, right. I'm sure that's exactly what happened.
So interesting, because I have so many men who are like, oh yeah, jump out of an airplane, whitewater kayaking, whatever. But like, you want me to say what vulnerably to my partner? I'll pass. Thank you. So, it takes a lot of strength to go into that. Yeah.
It's courage. But I tell you what, the rewards are far greater than a 500-pound deadlift, far greater. And it'll probably improve your deadlift, because you're moving more energy. Once you get that basically you look at a shadow as like stuck energy. True. You've just trapped energy in your body. Why wouldn't you want to unstick that energy?
Right.
Untrap it and let it flow. So you got to look at your body kind of like energetic stream. Do you want it to be a trickle or a river?
Oh, there you go.
Right. And do you want it to be really clean water or clean energy, or stuck energy that, has to find its way through? It's gunked up, and some of it's not very powerful. So the training, which includes this emotional development training, I just look at all as part and parcel of training our mind, because ultimately the mind is everything. The mind creates our body. The mind creates our life. It's not our brain, it's our mind, our consciousness. So we train ourselves from the outside in to get to that center, to where we can work from it and operate from that center. And then we refine ourselves from the inside out.
Amazing.
And that's a daily practice.
Okay. So if somebody said to you, why would I do this? Right. I mean, it seems obvious to me. I know it's obvious to you.
I would say, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Right. But I imagine you have to answer this
question. The question is, or the answer is, if you want to live the most whole and full life possible, you have to take control of training your mind and your consciousness and your body, because guess what? If you're not training it, someone else is training it for you. And I don't mean effective coach. I mean society, culture, your parents, social media, right?
I mean, there's so many people who wake up at a certain point and they're like, oh my God, my whole life is based in other people's expectations and other people's
stories, and even our culture story about money, or sex or religion. It's all stories.
Yep.
But the reason, most people don't awaken to the fact that it's not necessarily their story, or maybe the story isn't serving them.
Right.
I'm not putting down any particular belief system at all here. I'm just saying, examine them, right?
Yeah. Examine, right.
Live the examined life.
Yes.
Socrates said, or the unexamined life is not worth living, which is pretty harsh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with that, but he was trying to make a point, right? Life gets better when you begin to examine it. What does it mean to examine your life? It means to train your mind.
Mm.
How do you train your mind? You got to train your body first. And then you got to go through the mental layers that are resistance layers to learn how to concentrate and focus, clear your brain up. Then you get into the emotional, the heart, and the whole body feeling. And then that experience is intuition and openness. And then we can start to have a discussion about what it truly means to do spiritual development.
Right. I imagine that takes years before.
It takes time, but it accelerates, right? So
yes.
we're not talking, it is a lifetime path, but we're talking incredible progress in just 1 year, extraordinary progress in 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
And if you try to bypass the emotional, that literally is quite literally called a bypass, right?
Yeah.
The emotional or spiritual bypass. And we see that happening with psychedelics. We see it happening with breath work, and you end up with a bunch of people with spiritual egos who are walking around thinking that they're all sort of advanced when they haven't done some of the preliminary work.
Yeah. It seems like
they're not integrated, in other words. Again, not to judge, right? It's great work.
But it seems like the true spiritual practitioners actually are very humble.
Extraordinarily humble. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not sleeping with their students and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for, for teaching such an integrated path. It feels, as I use my body a lot to, feel and sense what people are doing and what they're teaching, it feels very, my body feels very relaxed and at peace, and like this sense of relief of like, oh, thank God you're out there in the world guiding people to have these experiences without bypassing, without just focusing on one little piece of the pie, to really, really focus on the whole thing, whole humanity.
Yeah, it's important work.
Yeah. What would you, I feel like we just dipped our toe in the water, but as we're kind of wrapping up, what do you want to leave people with? Is there some kind of inspiration or some kind of, something that you learned the hard way that you want to leave people with, and then they can find out more about you?
I think our last conversation, the last piece we were talking about, is really important. If you're not training your mind, then culture, society is training it for you, and the results will speak for itself. So if you're feeling burnout, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling out of sorts, depressed, anxious, whatever, it's because, right? And you could point to you could say, no, Mark, there's a biological reason. True, because you haven't trained your body out of that. And how do you train your body? You train your mind. So it all comes back to the mind. It takes a strong mind to train the body. It takes a strong body to train the mind. Where the mind leads, the body follows. Where the body leads, the mind follows. It's the same.
Yeah.
And so to look at take responsibility for training, and then to look at the body, mind, and the spirit as one integrated whole, but you can train them together as separate parts by bringing awareness to the separate parts. Just like you wouldn't say, well, I'm going to train my chakra system and then just do one thing and hope that it's going to open up all your chakras. No, you really have to bring some attention and some skillful means to each energy center to open them up. Yep. That's what I mean. So you bring skillful means to the physical training, but you do it with awareness, and you bring some mental concentration training, right? So you start to integrate all this, and then over time, it just becomes one thing. So a workout is a spiritual practice, right?
Yeah.
Walking your dog is
everything then becomes a spiritual practice.
Everything becomes a spiritual practice. Everything becomes an opportunity to improve your emotional, relational life.
Yeah.
Everything becomes an opportunity to listen internally to your heart and your gut, and you listen for God's voice inside of you, all that kind of stuff. Everything is an opportunity for training.
I appreciate that you said relational too, right? Because there's us, and then we're constantly in relationships and dynamics. And so I really find that the relational piece, that's most of what I work on, is the relational.
That's and the hardest work is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it has to, right? Your foundation of self-knowing and self-remembering, right? Without that sense of, oh, I can actually not control my mind, but, witness my mind and navigate and focus and master, we're kind of fucked in relationships. We can't do that.
Yeah, you're kind of like buffeted around a little bit.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. And where can people find more of you and how to do your programs?
Just to learn more about Unbeatable Mind, then the website is unbeatablemind.com. You can see that if you have the videos kind of behind me.
Yeah.
Unbeatablemind.com. And I have a book by that name out, and you can find it on Amazon and stuff. markdevine.com is my personal website. So that's where you'll find my podcasts and my blog and my books and stuff. And if anyone out there since this is for men, if you want to really go the warrior path, Unbeatable Mind is a warrior path, but if you really want the hardcore, Seal Fit, right? Come to a Seal Fit event, because we still run those Crucible events. We have 12, 24, and 50-hour nonstop physical training. And it's considered the hardest training in the world outside of the SEALs, but it's not just about being hard. It's about being whole. And there's an incredible transformative experience in just preparing for the event and undergoing the event, and the team and the friendships you develop. It's like it's transformative. So sealfit.com, you can learn about that at unbeatablemind.com too, because it's the same team that's running those two teams.
All combined.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a blast, and you're awesome. You're a great interviewer.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.